this just literally broke moments ago. We have put it up on Hannity.com. I've been reading it. The United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court accuracy concerns. Now, I had 4 paragraphs I haven't read, and then we'll go get John Solomon's view on this. It goes on to say the FBI's handling of the Carter Page applications as portrayed in the Office of Inspector General report was antithetical to the heightened duty of candor described above. They kept saying, you have a much greater bar and responsibility here. The frequency with which representations made by FBI personnel, Jim Comey, turned out to be unsupported or contradicted by information in their possession. So let me go through this. The frequency with which representations made by the FBI personnel turned out to be unsupported, meaning false, or contradicted by information that they had in their possession. Oh, exculpatory information. And with which they withheld information detrimental to their case. Oh, yeah, we don't want you to see the real stuff. Then you're not going to give us what we want. It goes on to say, because this is, I think, devastating, detrimental to their case, calls into question whether information contained in other FBI applications is reliable. The FISA court expects the government to provide complete, accurate information in every filing with the court. Without it, the FISA court cannot properly ensure that the government conducts electronic surveillance for foreign intelligence purposes only when there is a sufficient factual basis. Therefore, the court orders that the government shall no later than January 10, 2020, inform the court in a sworn written submission of what is done, what it has done and plans to do to ensure that the statements of facts in each FBI application accurately and completely reflects information possessed by the FBI that is material to any issue presented by the application. In the event that the FBI at the time of that submission is not yet able to perform any of the planned steps described in the submission, it shall include A, proposed timetable for implementing such measures, and B, an explanation of why. In the government's view, the information in FBI applications submitted in the interim should be regarded as reliable. Wow. It is further ordered, pursuant to FISA Court Rule of Procedure 62A, that the government shall, no later than December 20th, 2019, complete a declassification review of the above-referenced order of December 5, 2019, in anticipation of the FISA courts publishing that order. Wow. In view of the information released to the public in the OIG report, the court expects that such review will entail minimal, if any, redactions. That is one pissed-off court. Now, what did I say? How many times have I said it? You never lie to a judge. I'd never lie to Judge Judy. You're less than candid with Judge Judy. She scares me. Actually, met her. She's tough as nails. But she's don't mess with her. John Solomon, who we have on for other reasons as well. We're reading this in pretty much real time here. Your reaction?
Yeah. Well, listen. Honestly, it's awful late and kind of little for the court to react now, because for 2 years there was overwhelming evidence in the court of public opinion, thanks to your show and my reporting and all the other great people who worked on this, Greg Jarrett. But it is nonetheless a stinging rebuke of the FBI and every one of those officials who went out there in the last 2-3 years and denied there was anything wrong. Rod Rosenstein, James Comey, Andy McCabe, James Baker, and my favorite, Adam Schiff. All of those people knew that there were a serious problem, and they stuck their head in the sand and hoped it would go away. And only now, because of the Horowitz report and the court order, do we know for sure that the FBI engaged in such sweeping misconduct that the court wonders whether any of the FICEs it's been getting are accurate. I mean, that's what the ruling says today. We doubt all the accuracy.
Well,
based on
it's a crime to commit a premeditated fraud on a court. Now, again, another piece of the puzzle that we've been stating over and over again that the mob and the media never covered. But I will say this. I'm wondering, I think the court's been following this closely. I think they've known now for a while they've been lied to, or suspected very much that they've been lied to, and a fraud was perpetrated on the court. Now I think the court, because of the Inspector General's report, now has the means to come in and demand this be rectified. It sure does. And, they talk about this December 5th filing that's under seal right now. I suspect, as I've been saying on your show for the last week or so, that Attorney General Barr or the Justice Department has gone in and withdrawn or taken some very drastic action to tell the court how bad these FICEs were, beyond what the IG did. And when we get to see that court order declassified, we're going to get even more a sense of just how much willful misconduct occurred here. And, this is a serious time for the court. You've got Lindsey Graham talking about, I might not allow the court to be renewed because I don't think it did its job here. You've got, a very important national security function with FICEs. If they're done right, they protect our country. If they're done wrong, they trample on liberties. And I think the next 3 or 4 months are going to be critical for the country and its leaders to get this fixed and right so that we don't lose a valuable national security tool. When you have Devin Nunes and Lindsey Graham saying that we might have to get rid of the FISA court, that's not good for our safety and security as Americans. That then compromises us in a very ugly, dangerous world, and the likes of Comey signing it when it was unverifiable and he had numerous warnings. All right, I want to change gears here. I read your report today. Latvia government, and you sent me over, I guess, what were the original documents about this, says it flagged suspicious Hunter Biden payments in 2016. First, I want you to explain something. You hear Joe bragging about you're not getting the billion. He's leveraging $1 billion tax dollars. Then we got zero experience. Hunter, you're not getting the billion. You fire the prosecutor. Joe knew was investigating us. All right. To me, that was slam dunk, end of case. Right. Everything that I see involving this country seems corrupt. Why is that? Well, there are these former Soviet republics where corruption has run amok in what we call the oligarch system, where a few people got rich and they kind of are the puppet masters for the country. And one of those puppet masters in Ukraine was a guy named Zlochevsky, the owner of Burisma, who hired Hunter Biden, assumably to keep these sort of investigations away from him so he wouldn't be detected for the sort of misconduct that has now been alleged. But here is what we now know. The most important development in today's story. Joe Biden has been telling us for the last few months. His story keeps changing, right? First, he never talked to Hunter. Then Hunter said, I talked to my dad about it, and I didn't really know they were under investigation. Then we showed he did know he was under investigation. But the thing they've been hanging their hat on the last few weeks is, at the time I fired the prosecutor, no big deal because the case against my son's company was dormant. That is bunk. There was enormous activity going on in December, January, and February of 2016, right as the election was starting. And this is the new one. The new one is the Latvian government, a Soviet republic neighbor of Ukraine, said, hey, we see these transactions to Hunter Biden. They don't look right. We think you should investigate them. They might be money laundering or evidence of money laundering. And they send that to the Ukrainian government 1 month before Joe Biden intervenes and fires the prosecutor overseeing this case. Joe Biden's story that nothing was going on in the case is demonstrably disproven by this document and several other things that you and I have talked about in your show the last few weeks. Now, Hunter claims that he never got a penny from China, but his lawyer did say something to the effect, if I'm not mistaken, that, he just hasn't cashed in his shares. Isn't that true? Yeah, I mean, equity shares. There is, that's right. There is some ambiguity about what happened in China. There's very little ambiguity about what happened in Ukraine. So how much money are we talking about here? That again, this is your reporting. Right. You're talking, I guess, to these sources. Yeah. How do you know? Do any of them have an agenda? Well, everyone has an agenda, right? And in Ukraine, I've said that in all my columns. Listen, it's tough to navigate this, right? But what we know is the Latvian government says on the record, the Ukrainian government's released the document. There is no doubt a concern was raised in February 2016 about the money being paid to Hunter Biden. That's contrary to anything Joe Biden has been saying. There were no red flags. There was nothing to be worried about. That's not true. Now, we need a real investigation to get to the bottom of this. And here's what we do know.
in March of this year, 3 years after this Latvian memo was sent, the Ukrainian prosecutors reopened the case in Ukraine, and they did so because they got access to new financial records. And they have said publicly at a news conference just a month ago that they are looking at money laundering, the very allegation that was in this Latvian document, and they've expanded it to look at also things like the theft of state or government funds. There's a very active investigation in Ukraine. We should wait and see how the new president and the new prosecutor deal with that. But I do suspect we're going to get some clarity in the next 4 to 6 months from Ukraine about what they think really went on with Hunter Biden, Burisma, and the owner, Mr. Zlochevsky.
What is all this stuff? I have not been following it at all, except that I see that Rudy has been traveling the world and, I guess, digging up information about the Bidens, I guess, or is it just, or the corruption in general, or election interference as described by the Ukrainian court and by Politico on January 11th of 2017?
Right. So, listen, I don't know as much. I haven't tracked Rudy's movements as closely the last few months. You know, back.
Well, apparently, if he makes a telephone call to you, John Solomon, that's public information now.
Yes, they should probably.
God forbid that John Solomon, actually, as an investigative reporter, has contacts.
Yeah, that's the silly part about it. And there were many other reporters in those call logs. They just chose not to release them. I think Rudy Giuliani has been for more than a year looking at the issues in Ukraine as they affect President Trump's defense and things like the Mueller report and now the impeachment trial. And he's trying to get the best evidence for his client to make a case of his innocence. And one of those cases is there might have been really legitimate concerns in Ukraine about Hunter Biden that would warrant a president saying, could you get to the bottom of it? That would be a natural legal defense for Rudy Giuliani to help the president build in this impeachment proceeding. And we should wait and see what he releases. There's some talk he's going to go before Senator Graham's committee and release his evidence. There's all the things I put into the public. And remember, all my things are documented. You can click and see the documents and read the information yourself. There are a lot of questions, none of them answered, but a lot of important questions. And the most important is, did Joe Biden engage in an appearance of a conflict of interest when he fired a prosecutor he knew was investigating his son's company? I think we're getting a clearer answer every day on that, and there ought to be some accountability brought to that issue.
All right, John Solomon.